Hey everyone, it's now time to introduce our second keynote speaker of the day, and this is going to be an absolutely amazing story that you're going to hear. And I'm not going to do too much of a big introduction because I'm sure she's going to do that herself, but I will tell you that her name is Farkhunda Muhtaj. She's a humanitarian activist, and she was involved in a huge operation called Operation Soccer Balls. It was a mission to rescue the Afghan girls football team from the Taliban last year. And that's all I'm going to say, because I'm sure Farkhunda is going to talk about it a lot. And what we will do as well, we will do a Q&A session towards the end. So if you've got any questions or any comments that you'd like to make to Farkhunda, put it into the Q&A section, and then we'll give you a shout out towards the end. But I would like to give a warm welcome on this beautiful International Women's Day to Farkhunda Muhtaj. Farkhunda, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. Hello to everyone, and happy International Women's Day to everyone on this panel and so many more that are absent. I'm very delighted to be a part of this wonderful conference, and really humbled to be with so many incredible leaders in football. I'll briefly introduce myself, and then I'll just jump right into the discussion today. So I am currently the captain of the Afghanistan women's national team, and I compete in the Turkish Super League for Fatih Vatanspor. I actually just recently transferred here, and I'm just starting to settle myself. So it's a cool adjustment, to say the least. Other than that, I was a student athlete at York University, competing on the varsity women's soccer team. And I was able to captain in my final 2 years, where I also earned a Bachelor of Science degree in kinesiology and health sciences, and went on to pursue a Bachelor of Education degree, where I specialized in science and physical education and became a teacher in that. I actually graduated last June, so not too long ago. And as soon as I was done competing at the varsity level, I continued to stay involved with York University as an assistant coach for the women's soccer program, and continued to be involved as a research associate, where I'm researching the transition between high school and university for student athletes, and trying to do a gap analysis and see where the gaps exist, how we can ease that transition, and what we can do to improve the experience for student athletes. On top of that, I am the co-founder and director of Scarborough Simbas. It's a nonprofit organization that's based in Toronto, and we use football to help empower newcomers and refugees to Canada. And I'm also a humanitarian ambassador for Penny Appeal Canada. So specifically with Afghanistan and what's going on, we've pushed many campaigns in order to help in the crisis. And in August of 2021, I also helped lead the evacuation of the Afghanistan youth national players to Portugal. So I will just begin my discussion and my journey right away, and really talk about how football has positively impacted it. But first off, I really do want to thank the women around the globe that have spent centuries and decades fighting fearlessly to bring positive change around the world. Whether it be challenging societal norms, systems of oppression, or defying preconceived notions of femininity, women have really persevered to show their impact on a global scale. So thank you. And I do know, we've made a lot of progress in the last decade, especially in the last few years. And thanks to the female pioneers, we are now, there's now so many more opportunities for women in football, opportunities to coach, be a part of management teams, and I can't thank the organizations and clubs and pioneers in football that have done that today. And so that's really why we're here. We're here to thank them and recognize the achievements of women so far, specifically in football. I know we can all agree that women's football isn't yet where we want it to be, but women in football have inspired and empowered millions of women and girls to continue the mission of making the beautiful game fully inclusive for everyone. And today's focus is really going to be on, the refugee crisis, what football can do to help as well, and the woman, and really focusing on the women and girls across the globe that continue to defy the myth that football is not a women's game. Many women to this day oppose all odds and risk their lives to play football, and it is a reality that they face on a regular basis. And, football really is the identity of so many young women and girls. Yet, the lack of opportunities are what deter women from pursuing that passion. And so I'd like to share my experience in football as a racialized young female and share what football has given to me, what I was able to give back to the game, and how investing in women in football builds resilient individuals that will not only strengthen the game, but will multiply what football has given them. So without further ado, I'm just gonna, speak about my journey and my upbringing. Originally from Afghanistan, my parents were forced to leave due to war, and we later relocated to Canada when I was 2. From a young age, I knew how blessed and fortunate I was to be in Canada. And I was safe, I was free, I had access to more than just my basic needs. And Canada really gave my family hope. It gave my family a new beginning, and a beginning that we didn't take for granted. My goal was to be a global active citizen and give back to Canada for giving me a new beginning, and also to give back to Afghanistan because I knew the struggles that, my people were going through. And although I was living a comfortable lifestyle in Canada and I had the privilege to maximize the opportunities in my life, so many others did not. So I really wanted to use my unique skill set to help the most vulnerable achieve that. And so growing up, I was an extremely busy young little girl. From the age of 4, I attended school from 8:30 to 3:30. After school, I was enrolled in any extracurricular activity, you name it. If it was school sports, leadership camps, tutoring, I was there until 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, my dad would pick me up. I would quickly rush into the car, and he would have my bag ready for me to attend mosque. So I would have my mosque uniform. I would have my mosque books and stuff. I would quickly read over my lessons, and I was at the mosque until 7:30 every day. Afterwards, when 7:30 approached, my dad would be ready for me again at the mosque with my soccer bag, this time in the car. I would quickly get undressed, wear my soccer clothes, get ready to train Monday to Friday. And so, as you can imagine, my car was my magic vehicle. It was such a multi-purpose thing where I was able to use it as a change room. It was my dinner table. It was my bed, my homework location. And just when my parents thought that that wasn't enough to keep me busy, on the weekends, I attended Farsi classes. So 9:30 to 12 on the weekends, I learned how to read and write in Farsi. And the rest of my weekend was pretty much, a ton of other structured events, such as completing my homework, watching football matches, competing in matches, and also volunteering at local community organizations. For my family, philanthropy is a must, and it still is. And so giving back to the community was extremely important because I grew up with a mentality that, you can't take everything for granted, and what others don't have is, just mere chance, in the sense that, when refugees and newcomers and immigrants come to this nation, they are put into situations where they don't desire, and it's not their fault, right? They're forced out of their nation, and now it's an opportunity for us to help support them, similar to how anybody else would have supported generations prior. And so growing up as an Afghan Canadian, I always reflected back at Afghanistan. I reflected at the high poverty rates, the low education rates, the lack of funds that allowed the country to prosper. and really the limited opportunities everyone had, especially women. I noticed that due to economic instability, women had suffered immensely, and football is really a microcosm of our societies if you think about it. And I was able to make that connection very quickly. So, for instance, in women's football or women's sport in general, if the men's team isn't successful, then that probably means A, there's no women's program, or second of all, if there's a women's program, it's a subpar program at times. I also rarely saw myself reflected in football. Not many people looked like me at the coaching level, at the playing level, especially the management level. It was just absurd to see a Middle Eastern or, an Asian female competing in sport. And so that's why I was really determined to continue sport and, impact. The only person that I really saw that looked like me was Nadia Nadim. And of course, she's a one-off. She's a phenomenal player. And that's really all I knew growing up. And so I was really determined to compete at the university level, varsity level, and help shift that narrative of what Afghan women look like and what Afghan women in sport look like. And for those who grew up in Canada or the States, you know that the culture of university sport is very big. And that's kind of like the stepping stone to professional sport. And so I was recruited to compete on York University's women's soccer team. And I was able to captain in my final 2 years, which was great. I do take a lot of pride in representing my university at the varsity level. And again, I was able to complete 2 degrees while doing that. So although I was proud, at the same time, I didn't know if I was supposed to be frustrated that I was competing in varsity sport, because I was told that I was the only female Afghan competing at the varsity level. And so, that's not necessarily a stage in your life where you're like, oh my God, that's spectacular. That's when you really reflect and you're like, well, why aren't there racialized women? Why aren't there more Afghan women? Because I can assure you, they love sport just as much as anybody else does. And so those questions started to really pile up in my mind. And I knew there were many biases and stereotypes really surrounding what an Afghan or, what an Afghan Muslim female looks like. And because of that, I was determined to help shift that narrative. And I was going to help change that. And in the next few years, I really got started and really invested my time in working towards it. In 2016, while I was a student athlete at York University, a gentleman from the Afghan community actually called my dad and insisted that I attended an identification tournament in California. He said members of the Afghanistan Football Federation were going to be there. They were going to be evaluating players and really focusing in on future prospects for the national team. What he shared was that there was going to be a lot of investments that were being made in women's sport in Afghanistan. And to me, that was huge. That was a huge win. And it's something that I didn't, expect. They said they were going to introduce, training camps, and we were going to compete in FIFA competitions. And there was an experienced coaching staff that was coming in. And this really did gain my interest. And it almost shifted my childhood dream of competing for the Canadian national team and giving back to the nation through football. The only difference now was that I was going to give back to Afghanistan through football. Giving back to Afghanistan is something I always wanted to do, and I was, determined to do it. The only difference was for me, in my mind, as a young girl, I thought I was going to give back through my education. But nonetheless, giving through sport is just as powerful, I would argue. And I always wanted to help empower the women and girls of Afghanistan and help build the foundation for future generations to benefit from. I knew that by competing on the national team, it wasn't like we were going to make the FIFA World Cup immediately or, be a stellar team. But if it was a stepping stone for generations to come, I think, you can look at yourself in the mirror and be proud of what you were able to help accomplish. And for the whole Afghanistan women's national team, all of us, all of our teammates, the coaching staff, it was more than just football. It was really about shifting mindsets and bridging the gap in gender equality, but also progressing opportunities for women in Afghanistan. As you can imagine, due to safety and security threats, there's always a lack of opportunity for women in general. And so that allowed us to provoke change and also inspire young women and girls to see that, hey, we can compete on the Afghanistan women's national team one day. There is a team. This is something that I want to work towards. And they see themselves reflected in the national team. And so wearing the jersey for the first time, I won't even lie, I was very emotional. I was thankful for my parents and everything they had done to support my journey, but also I was very thankful for the people, the Afghan people that had sacrificed so much in order for us, the younger generation, to be able to compete at the world stage. And so I never took the opportunity for granted, and I really wanted to capitalize. And so when I put on the shirt, it was a huge sense of responsibility. And you were essentially representing more than just yourself. And that's how I felt. I was representing the women and girls, the vulnerable population, the people of Afghanistan. And I wanted to bring pride to them through football. And to be very clear, the journey with the national team was not linear by any means. As a team, we faced a lot of challenges and barriers and difficulties. We were often criticized. We lacked funding. The safety of our players in Afghanistan was at risk. And there was a lot of politics at play, just like any national team. But with Afghanistan, unfortunately, at times it would be amplified. And although I always stood with my teammates and fought the same battles, I never had a social media presence, so you would have never known. Nonetheless, I continued to play for my nation and, at times would be criticized. But I think if you continue to play and you can justify to yourself why you're playing and why it's important to continue the mission, um, you know, there's nothing to fear. And so that's kind of what I went to work towards. And for me, it was similar to the US women's national team, where they've always protested and they've done an incredible job at bringing change, but they never gave up their platform, which was the pitch. And so, although competing on the national team was an uphill battle, I personally had a roller coaster of emotions while competing. I cannot thank enough the people that I was able to connect through sport and through football, and especially competing on the national team. Specifically, an amazing role model that I have to this day, which is Katayun Khosroya. She's actually the former Irani national team head coach. And in October 2018, when I was representing Afghanistan at the CAFA Championships in Uzbekistan, that's where we met. And it's funny how we sort of met. I was analyzing a game and sitting in the stands, and she was also doing the same. And Iran and Afghanistan, we both speak Farsi. So we were both speaking Farsi. We just said hi to each other and started a conversation. And where it was, I guess, convenient for us, we would insert some English words. And we noticed, we're like, hey, you don't have a Farsi accent when you say the English words, and I didn't either. And so that's when we started to learn more about each other. And she is by far one of the most, I think, influential women in football. She works so tirelessly behind the scenes, and she's been a role model ever since. And for me, what she was able to do with Iran's national team and play for the national team, and then afterwards coach, and build the framework of women's sport in Iran was incredible. And that's kind of what I wanted to replicate with the national team as well. She began to ask me thought-provoking questions about, our national program and the structure of the youth program. And to be quite honest, I had no clue. I didn't know how the youth program ran, because as a as a player that was, I started with the national team when I was 18 years old, but I never came through the youth program. I was just, you know, placed right into the senior national team. And so from that point on, I was concerned and I was like, wait, what is the structure of the youth national program in Afghanistan? What's the player pathway? How does the AFF select players? And so I actually collaborated with an academy in Barcelona and the AFF in order to deliver training camps for the youth national players. And I was really focused on, you know, building methodology sessions for the players and the coaching staff. Unfortunately, due to COVID, it never became a reality, as it's still dragged on for, you know, as long as it is. Hopefully we'll get through it soon, but it's really interesting how, you know, me focusing in on the youth national team a couple of years ago actually made me like spend months and months being with the youth national team, the same team that, you know, had no clue that we were concerned about them years before. So, and being involved with sport has been more than just on the pitch for me. I think it's important to, you know, work hard on the pitch, but then outside of the pitch as well, female footballers and footballers in general just have such an amazing skill set that so many can benefit from. And so in 2020, when I co-founded Scarborough Simbas, the point of it was to help empower refugees and newcomers through sport. So Scarborough Simbas is a nonprofit organization. We use, sorry, I don't even know how to get rid of, with the new WhatsApp, even if your phone, I've turned my phone off, but the things keep coming in. So I do apologize, the notifications on the laptop. But Scarborough Simbas is a nonprofit organization. We use football to help ease the settlement journey of refugees and newcomers to Canada. And sport really does have the power to integrate newcomers. It allows them to connect with each other. It gives refugees a sense of belonging and an opportunity to really feel valued. It's part of the healing process, and it makes them feel included in a meaningful way. So just picture, you know, leaving a nation, you're being forced out, and the last thing you want to feel or know is that you can't even kick a ball with somebody else. And so this free program has been a project that has been really growing in the last couple of years. And it's only been active for 2 years, but the first year we had about 50 refugees and newcomers. And now we already have like hundreds of people on our waiting list. And so that just shows us that, you know, refugees want to be included. They want to be part of our communities. They want to be a part of sport, and they know the impacts of it as well. So let us be welcoming when we have opportunities to impact our communities through sport. So fast forward, you know, was very involved in football from a young age. And then the situation in Afghanistan happened in 2021. So as you all are well aware, the Afghan government fell, leaving the nation in a very precarious situation. I think, I mean, the chaotic scenes were just very disturbing for all of us. And immediately when that happened, it's actually crazy because we were preparing for the Asian qualifiers, which was in September. And even in August, up to the first week of August, the AFF was, you know, collaborating with me. And I was like, you know, the situation in Afghanistan is really bad. Do you really think we're going to compete in the tournament? And there were, it's just like Afghans didn't believe that the country would fall. And our conversation went from the Asian qualifiers to them calling me and asking to help evacuate the Afghanistan national team. And so immediately when that happened, I was actually at work and I left and called it a bunch of humanitarian lawyers and organizations. And I was looking at ways that I could help support during this cause. And unfortunately, I didn't get the answers that I was looking for. People told me, well, all of Afghanistan is going through this. What makes your group so special? Or, you know, unfortunately, it's the reality of the Middle East. War always breaks out, which wasn't a good enough answer for me. And considering how sensitive the matter was, I was going to stay determined. And so that same day, again, Kat Khosrowyar, who's the former Iranian national team head coach, she called me very concerned about the Afghanistan national team and was like, hey, I want to support Afghan people during this time. What can I do to help? And so I told her I was going to help evacuate the players. How I was going to do it, I didn't know yet. But immediately we got started. We were, looking at different ways and policies that we can get them over to either Canada or the States. But then her older sister, who's very well connected us to US government officials. And so we were able to, share the initiative, why the players needed to be evacuated immediately, and the sensitivity behind it. And along with US government officials, intelligence officers, Kat Khosrowyar, and also Wido Zemarai, who's the former goalkeeper of the Afghanistan women's national team and is, a phenomenal person as well. We were all able to quickly get together and develop plans in order to help evacuate them. Now, we faced many challenges and barriers trying to evacuate them. As you can imagine, the political landscape in Afghanistan was constantly evolving. So every time we developed a plan, by the time you would try executing it, there was another policy in place, or violence was escalating in certain areas, or there was a Taliban checkpoint that the families couldn't get through in order to meet up at our locations where they would be picked up and brought into the airport. So unfortunately, even though we tried countless times before the August 31st deadline in Kabul, we were unsuccessful. And so it was very devastating, of course, for the players. At the same time, they had to trust me blindly. They didn't know where they were headed, why they were going to those locations, and the details behind it. But in order to not jeopardize the mission, I was unable to actually share that detail with them. And I was able to play the unique role of collaborating with the operations team from governments in order to help develop plans and also collaborate with families and, share those plans with them. Now, the other difficulties we faced is, Afghan families are quite large, and considering we didn't have an indefinite amount of people that we could have helped evacuate, we just couldn't take families of 10 or 15. So we would have to limit it to, 3-4 family members with you. And imagine telling young girls that, unfortunately, you're going to have to choose a couple people to come with you. It's devastating. How do you choose that? So a lot of families, either sacrifice their parents or sacrifice one parent, or came with some sibling, or the parents sacrificed their spot in order for some siblings to come with the footballers. So it was devastating and it was disheartening to see, but it's just the reality of what refugees and newcomers go through. And so after the August 31st, prior to the August 31st deadline, we didn't see success. And when I tell you the families experienced hell, it was hell. They went through mountains and canals and you name it in order to get to those locations, and were even steps away at times behind secret bases that they didn't know was where they were going to be evacuated, just to know that they can get evacuated. And so we didn't give up. The August 31st deadline had passed, and so we developed a new plan. We were no longer going to evacuate them through Kabul. We were going to evacuate them through Mazar, which is about 10 hours away. And so now we were arranging buses. We were going to get them to Mazar and hopefully get them through. The only issue is that we originally had a group about over 200 footballers, youth national footballers and their family members, but half of them could no longer continue. And so some of them had legitimate reason. I mean, all of them, of course, had legitimate reasons, but some of them, for instance, were from the northern province, and Mazar is in the direction of the north. So if they were going in that direction and the Taliban had stopped them, they would assume that they're fighting with the Northern Alliance. And so they would receive negative repercussions. Other family members, because of the trauma they've experienced through that whole, 2 weeks before the August 31st deadline, They were thankful of how much we were able to help, but they were like, you know what, if this is what it takes to get out of Afghanistan, we'll just stay. And so fast forward, we got to them to Mazar. Unfortunately, again, we were unsuccessful in getting them out immediately. We tried to look for viable options through nations that were close by. So Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, fortunately, that wasn't possible. And so we had to keep the families for over 20 days in safe houses. And of course, that has its own challenges because now you have, over 80 people together in, in a place where they're far from home. They're not with all their family members. Their mental state was deteriorating. They're in the middle of a war, in the middle of a humanitarian crisis. And so it was difficult. And of course, again, they had to trust me blindly. They didn't know how they were going to be evacuated when, and that is information that I was unable to share with them. And so finally, on September 26th, a breakthrough came, and we had a very short window of 3 hours. We got asylum to Portugal, and we had to basically capitalize within those 3 hours and wake the girls up, send all their documents to them, have buses arranged to come pick them up from the safe house, get them into the airport, checked in and onto the airplane within 3 hours and off. And we were able to do that. It was actually crazy when it was happening because I was called, we were so tired working 24/7 and literally 24/7 just because of the different time zones with Afghanistan, Portugal, the States. And so that same day, the operations team actually told me, like, Far, you can go to bed today. We don't anticipate anything happening. And I was like, oh, wow, like shocking. And so I went to bed, but in the middle of the night, I got a million calls until I finally woke up and they're like, we're moving. And I was like, we're moving? When are we moving? They're like, right now, get the girls ready. Like, we only have a certain amount of time, like hurry. And I was in shock and disbelief. And so it was amazing. It was an amazing it was an amazing feeling, of course. And, the families were so resilient, and it's all a testament of, how hard they pushed as well and how hard they worked and, experienced so much. We can talk about what happened in Afghanistan, but we were not there to experience it. And so it's all thanks to them, really, because they could have gave up at any point. And so now they were in Portugal, they're starting a new life. It was amazing. And the donor actually invited me, the donor that helped charter the flight invited me to Portugal, and the US government officials that helped with this process. And originally I was only supposed to be there for 4 days. I took a week off of my teaching position because in June I graduated from teaching science in phys ed. So I started a teaching position in September. I was assistant coach at York University as well and competing in League One in Canada as well. So I was doing a couple things there. And even teaching, honestly, it was at times a nightmare because I'm in the middle of a lesson and on my phone half the time because of the operation, or picking up phone calls and, my students wondering, like, what is Miss Muhtaj doing? But nonetheless, they got to see me on the news the next day and they're like, oh, Miss, why didn't you tell us you were doing this? But I took a week off, headed to Portugal, and originally was just supposed to coach them for a couple of days. We had set up some amazing initiatives with Benfica for them to go play a match with their foundation, which was incredible. We got tours from Sporting Lisbon and the soccer community, football community. And, I was supposed to head back home. But after I was there, we noticed the gaps that existed. And unlike any other nation or most other nations, Portugal doesn't have an Afghan diaspora. And so there was no one really there to connect with them and to be able to help them and support them and allow them to understand the settlement journey and the challenges that come along with it. And so they kept asking me, well, can you stay a couple more days? And I was like, yeah, I mean, sure, but I have, to go back to what I've been doing, because essentially that was everything I did was on a hold for like 2 months. And so I tried taking time off again. I couldn't. And so I was teaching virtually from Portugal and helping the families as well. So taking them on trips throughout Portugal. We really wanted to empower them and allow them to feel valued and welcomed and not feel the sense that they're any less than any Portuguese person. And so we took them on many trips around the nation. We allow them to learn about the culture within Portugal. I was coaching them. We set up training sessions, and so we were doing some incredible work. And then again, they kept asking me to extend, to the point where they're like, do you mind just staying and help building an integration plan for them, since you know the family's best? It seems like they trust you a lot, and I think it would be good for the families. And so I thought about it, and I was like, I mean, of course, this is what I love doing, working with like sport, refugees and newcomers, women and girls that are so deserving. And so I made the difficult decision to leave behind what I was doing in Canada. And I ended up staying there for about 3 months in order to help build an integration plan in collaboration with the US Embassy, the Portuguese government, and local organizations and donors. Now, remember that group that we had said that they no longer could continue, and they weren't going to go to Mazar and be evacuated and be helped by us? Well, I never forgot about them. And to be quite honest with you, although I was happy when we evacuated the first flight out, my heart was in a very uncomfortable position. I couldn't believe that everyone we had anticipated to support, we couldn't. And although it was through no one's fault, I wasn't going to sleep leaving behind half those. And so while in Portugal, with the help of, the network of us that we're supporting throughout. And again, this was a team effort the whole time, and an incredible team that I was a part of in order to do this. But, we arranged many conversations with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I had asked them many times in order to help more Afghans and those left behind. And thankfully, after pushing for 2 months and having many conversations with the Secretary of State, we were able to help evacuate another group of female footballers, national players, and their family members in November as well. Now, the funny coincidence actually is our first evacuation, we were successful on Kat Khosrowyar's birthday. The second evacuation was successful on my birthday. So it's just, what a coincidence. And it's so crazy how the world works. And literally God's plans are bigger than even our imaginations, which, I was speechless when that happened. But we were able to have them over again and, help settle them and provide gear and uniforms and, really focus in on their education, because that was of utmost importance, but also football and how sport can be used to help empower them and build critical life skills that will make sure that they're really successful in the long term. And so I went home for the holidays. My funding was over, but my mission with the families, of course, wasn't. I am, very invested in supporting them and really helping uplift them and ensuring that we can build long-term plans for them. And so I returned in January in order to give some basic necessities again and some football gear and coach them and train them. And also we've arranged many football matches for them as well. And there's nothing more empowering when, you get to step on that pitch and, revive your identity and love for the sport. And so that's kind of what I've been busy with and, focusing in on. And I haven't stopped, and none of us have really stopped. We continue to fundraise for the families and continue to do certain cool initiatives for them. And currently, due to the Portuguese integration plan, they're actually not all living in one general area. So the youth national team isn't necessarily a team now that's competing together all the time. So training together all the time, every day. Now, when all the families were in the hostel, and some families are still in a hostel until they're given homes and housing, we were training like a national team. Every single day we trained. We had very good intense sessions. Methodology sessions was provided for them by me. And in the evenings, we would have our fitness sessions. But as families were moving into their homes and at times hours away from each other, we were like, their football has to continue. And so we got them enrolled in their local clubs from their municipality, and they're training with their local academies for the girls that have been given homes. Those that are in housing, we continue to train as a youth national team. But similar to any national program, what we want to do with them essentially is have them compete on their club teams, and then get together every couple months and have a training camp. And although due to the unfortunate policies within Afghanistan, female athletes have been banned and they can't technically participate in organized competitions under the Afghanistan flag, of course. We want to be in this area, we want to be in a position where we're prepared. So when we do get that green flag, and we're pushing for that green flag, so it's not like we're waiting by any means. We're doing a lot of work, diplomatic work behind the scenes in order to make that possible. But until that is a reality, we're going to be prepared so that when we get that breakthrough and when we get to compete in those competitions, our girls are ready, and they really are the future of Afghanistan. And these girls are incredible, what they were able to do. And the first thing they said as newcomers and refugees when they came to Portugal, was that we want to use our voice and our platform to help empower other women and girls in Afghanistan. We want to use football to give back to Portugal. We want to show that, Afghan females are capable when given opportunities. And I think that's extremely, strong and bold for a young 15-year-old girl to say when coming into a nation where she doesn't speak the language, doesn't know the culture. But essentially, that's kind of the journey with the Afghanistan youth national team. And I think I'm over my time, so I should probably stop there. But I do want to reiterate or share a few things about what football has to offer and how we're very powerful as a football community in clubs and athletes around the world. We really are role models, and it just takes some education in order to inspire others to do the same. When I went to FC Barcelona and I was invited to speak to the athletes of La Masia, many of them were unfamiliar with the, giving back through other means and being a global active citizen. But after we spoke about global active citizenship and what we can do as footballers, all the kids, male and female, came to me and was like, what can we do to help refugees and newcomers? What can we do to help Afghanistan? And, immigration is very strong. John Herdman, who's the men's national team head coach for Canada, when he was asked what the reasoning behind success of the men's national team was, he said immigration. And I think that's something we all need to understand, that refugees are not threatening our societies, they're strengthening our societies through sport. So give them the opportunity. Sport is a blessing, football is a blessing. So let's share that blessing with everyone.
And hallelujah to that last sentence, Farkhunda. Thank you so much. I mean, ever thought about writing a book?
Yes, I really am considering it a lot, because there's a lot of details that are missing. And, at times people criticize you for making decisions, and which, you don't necessarily care about, because if you know your intention behind it, it doesn't bother you, but you do want to explain yourself and share your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Fascinating. Yes, you need to write a book, and when it's out and published, I'm going to buy a copy. Right. So I will, because it's fascinating. We've got one question in from Chris Hogg. If you mind just keeping it brief. because then I'm going to switch everybody over to the networking session. So Farkhunda, the question is, what advice would you give to the Ukrainian team members who decide to come to different countries as refugees?
I would give the same advice that I gave any Afghan leaving the nation. I think you're strong, you're powerful, and what you can, how you can impact your new society is immense. And the best way to do it, I think, is through sport. And so don't feel that now that you're a refugee, you can't continue what you love. Embrace it and, you know, be an active member of the new society.
Brilliant. We've had a couple of comments very quickly. This has been a brilliant and inspiring presentation. So thank you, Farkhunda. Somebody else saying amazing. Thank you so much. Definitely want to read the book.
Definitely. Thank you.
Farkhunda Muhtaj, thank you so much for your time. You've been absolutely brilliant. And yes, I look forward to the future of the Afghan women's football team. Fingers crossed. And for all the other people that are still there, our thoughts are with you at this time, of course. Thank you so much, Farkhunda. Right, everybody else, we have a networking session going on in the moment in the other room. So if you want to make some new connections, reflect on today, definitely reflect on what Farkhunda was talking about, because it's very pertinent what's going on in the world right now, for sure. Head over to there, because it's Greg Campbell of Campbell Tickell who is doing that. And then I will be back with you guys later around about 4:15, where we've got a couple more workshops, and then we're going to round up the day. So I will see you shortly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. Enjoy the rest of your day. And
thank you. I want the book. You got to do the book.
For sure. For sure. Okay. See ya.
Take care. See you soon.